and welcome to A Table for One. Thanks for joining your hosts Jeanette Aycock and Shanta Langford as we savor the single feast of life. And join us as we chat and share about the over 40 life experience. All right. So I kind of wanted to touch on something a little bit more serious this episode. It was a couple of weeks ago, something really sad and disturbing happened. You know, I'm a big YouTube person now. Since I got rid of cable, YouTube has become my cable TV. And I have quite a few people that I love that are my favorites that just keep me entertained. And one of the people who I just loved, and I just thought it just had so much wisdom, and he was just such a sweet person and a young person. But unfortunately, he committed suicide. And he was very open about his struggles with depression and suicide, his struggles before with it. So, you know, I think everybody who was subscribed to him were fully aware that he had his demons and his struggles. And unfortunately, he succumbed to them. And I felt so sad because he just seemed like such, I didn't know him personally, but he just seemed like such a wonderful person. And so, you know, just very accomplished. He was actually a hairdresser. He had his own business in New Jersey. He had recently moved from Jersey to Atlanta. He started a new relationship because he actually he was going through the process of a divorce with his husband, and then he got into a new relationship, and they actually had the YouTube show together, the new boyfriend. Well, the ex-husband and the new boyfriend. And unfortunately, that didn't work out, so they broke up about over a year ago. And he had been on for a while, and then I didn't see him for a while, and it was weird because maybe about a month or so ago, I thought about him, and I was like, I wonder what he's doing. And then everyone on YouTube got the news that he had committed suicide, and I just think, I think a lot of times people don't realize how dark it can be for some people. And
definitely,
how it's not as easy as thinking happy thoughts or, trying to get yourself out of it, because I think if no one has ever dealt with depression, they really don't understand it. And I've been very open and vocal about my own struggles with it. So, thank God I haven't been on that end of it. But, who's to say in terms of if you have a chemical imbalance and also a lot of psychological issues, if you don't deal with them, anything can erupt, So, I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to kind of talk about it just because I felt so sad for him.
Yes.
That he felt like he had to at 30, I think he was at 32, but I know he was in his early 30s if I'm not mistaken, but that was his only course of action. And I'm not saying, why did he do that? Because I know what that dark place is, but not to the severity of that, but I still know what that is.
Yes.
And how difficult it is to pull yourself out.
And speaking of depression, I mean, that is something that's definitely in my profession, and also my area of expertise is in depression. And you've kind of hit on a lot of the demographics in telling his story briefly of what depression is, and people forget that as you look at any illness, there are sometimes when illness becomes you have to look at it as a fatal illness, and depression can have a fatal outcome. It is something that we do have to keep in mind. But getting back to the demographics, you were talking about, male, and in his early 30s, and that is kind of the median age of onset for depression. That there's an incidence of anywhere from 8 to 26% of people over their lifetime who will develop it. Depression, men maybe being around 8 to 12%, and women maybe 20 to 26%. There are many ways to treat it, but as with any illness that can be fatal, a lot of times, no matter how you treat it, it may not have a favorable outcome. And it's not just the blues, but it's really a situation or an illness where it's very deep, affects your energy level. It can even affect your immune system. Depression is a very real physiologic thing.
So I would like for you to explain, because I think the reason why it took me so long to really accept that was what was going on with me is because at being part of the human experience, all of us will get sad, depressed, lonely, So how can you differentiate? I can't even say the word. How can you see the difference? Thank you. Easy for you to say. How can you kind of say to yourself, this is different? This is a little bit more different than just having, like you said, the blues or sad, because there's certain things that happen in your life that of course you're going to be sad. A divorce, a death, a job loss, a pet dying, a friendship ending, moving. But how does one person know that, this is deeper than just a normal reaction to a life experience or a life-changing event? Mm-hmm. So how would one know that it's different? Because I think for me, that was the problem, is because I was like, well, everybody goes through this. So everybody,
yes,
I'm suffering, but so is everybody else. So everybody gets depressed. And that was what I would tell myself. Well, everybody gets depressed in some way,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So how do you tell the difference?
And one of the chief ways, without getting into diagnostic and statistical manuals, now we're up to 5, the 5th editing of that diagnostic manual. The first thing to look at is duration, meaning how long has the depression lasted. When you're getting between 3 weeks and 3 months of having symptoms, that's one indicator. And what are the symptoms? The symptoms can be negative thinking. Depression is the kind of thing, I like to say, that can pull disaster out of the jaws of success, meaning that it doesn't matter how well things are going, a depressed person will be able to find the negative in it. Even if it's, you just won $1 million, the depressed person's reaction to that can be, watch, now I'm going to get cancer and die in a month, or I'm going to lose the money, or I'm going to invest it in a bad way. So there's negative thinking. Sometimes a depressed person can be seem like they're sapped of energy, but sometimes they can be agitated and restless, and it's hard for them to focus. They can become irritable, or they can be in a state where they just don't seem to be interested in anything. They don't offer any kind of rebuttal or any kind of counter to anything that's going on, and the response within them may be, well, what difference does it make anyway?
Right.
They can sleep a lot, or they could sleep less. They can have a weight gain or a weight loss. And the irritability may make them lash out at those who are loved ones or people who are trying to help them. They also may be withdrawn. They used to go and do things with friends, and suddenly you find that depressed person is making excuses for why they don't want to go out and do things. And also there can be suicidal thoughts, morbid thoughts, recurrent, repetitive thoughts of disaster or maiming or something that is going to hurt them. And rather than it being fleeting, because sometimes we will get these fleeting morbid thoughts, they will persist with the person who is depressed. So when you get any of those symptoms and they last from consistently for 3 weeks to 3 months, you have flipped into the area of having a major depression.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was always wondering about that. And so for people who know of a family member or a friend or whatever who has been open about their suffering, what are the signs, or if any signs, if it moves into the suicide part of it, or the thought of harming themselves, or are there any indicators? Because I think a lot of times when this happens, there is a huge sense of guilt and, well, why didn't I pick up on that? Or, oh, I remember when he said that, but I really didn't think about it until later, So how does one, because there's so much guilt that's tied to that with the people that they leave behind, that,
Yes, I think that you have a very good point. First and foremost, nobody should be expecting themselves to be mental health sleuthers or professionals in that regard, that, oh, I should have picked this up. Because often it's not like the person who is depressed, as I have described some of these symptoms, it's not like they're forthcoming about what's going on.
Right.
And sometimes when people are trying to plan what they may do, let's say suicide, they may become more secretive. I think the best thing that people who know the depressed person can do is to kind of make a point of letting them know that you are there for them. That, do a kind of wellness call on a periodic basis. If you feel like the person is getting more withdrawn, they're not returning your calls, make an attempt to text them or to leave a message. So everybody is not suicidal who is depressed. It doesn't go to that degree, but sometimes people who are depressed can feel like they're encapsulated in a bubble that they can't break the wall of, and they are able to hear your support, but sometimes they're not able to respond. So it can be very helpful if you just keep periodically letting them know that you're thinking about them. But things that are not helpful, as you pointed out earlier, are saying things like, well, snap out of it, or if you just would hang out with us more, you would get over this depression in a hurry. What is helpful is social interaction, and that's the last thing that some depressed people want. They want to be left alone. They have no energy. Everything feels like an effort, including conversation. But I think what can be very helpful is that those who care about them, let them know that they haven't been abandoned.
Right. And I know for myself, that was the huge signs, because I would just retreat and just hibernate and, not want to go out, not want to see anybody, not want to do anything, and just sleep all day and, sleep and eat, basically. But But
You know,
like you said, it's interesting
yeah.
because looking back on my life, I can kind of see where it started was probably when I was 15 or 16, where things started to shift for me mentally. And
What did you notice?
just a sadness and an anxiety all the time, you know. But definitely a sadness. And there were periods where it was just very dark, and I kept it from people. No one knew about it. I kept it to myself. Well, because I was always labeled growing up, strange, or oh, she's kooky, so I just always attributed that, well, maybe that's what it is. I'm just
Strange,
strange,
as opposed to,
kooky.
this is a medical illness.
Yeah, but I think growing up, and especially in our culture, we don't want to say that we need help outside of, Jesus is gonna fix it, so I think a lot of that was already ingrained in me, that pray it away, or this is nothing that no one else has gone through. I'm no different than anyone else, but then I'm weird and I'm kooky, and maybe I'm making too much of it, or maybe I'm supposed to be happier than I feel. When good things happen,
yes.
when bad things happen, but it would only take, and I think a lot of people need to know in terms of depression too, sometimes it's not the big major events that will trigger some people, although that definitely is a part of it. But for me, anytime I would slope into a deep depression, it wasn't anything over anything big. It was some small thing that happened that would take me over the edge, and I would just fall into this dark place. And it might be a comment that someone made. It might be, any little thing. It was never huge. Like losing a job. Yeah, I felt bad about it, but not a lot of tears of what that is. Like, you have tear levels. Because part of the thing has always been I detach from things that are too serious or too like overwhelming. I have a tendency to detach. So I wouldn't necessarily, if I lost a job, oh, okay, I'm going to be all right, right? And it's fine for a couple of months, but then some little thing will happen, and then the whole well of sadness and low self-esteem and all those things would just swoop in, and overtake me. So I know that, I wonder how many people do that too. It's, that's your defense mechanism. But what happens is, if some little thing kind of triggers it, then you just start thinking about everything. I would go all the way back to when I was 9,
Exactly.
Something happened when I was 30, and I will, Shanta, take it all the way back. And I just get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, mind you, that when it would happen, I would just like, oh, it'll be all right,
On the surface.
On the surface.
You would say. Yes.
But then what would happen is that obviously it's going to catch up to you.
It does. Yes, very, very real. And I think you're pointing to another thing that we have to look at is that, what are those inciting factors? And there are different types of depression. As you said, there are times when you can just feel blue or a little off.
Right.
And that may last a week.
Right.
Again, we're talking about duration. Then we talk about seasonal affective disorder, and that, again, the shortening of the days can be something that can cause people to become depressed because there is less light. And definitely in Scandinavian countries where they may have 3 months of no light at all, or more than 3 months, there's a higher incidence of depression and suicide. So that's a reality. So there's seasonal depressions. There's the feeling of a blue mood. There are depressions that are associated with an actual loss. There are biologic depressions, and that's the more serious one we're talking about, where something in somebody's internal biology flips a switch. Maybe a genetic switch within them, because there are genes that code in our structure for depression, and something can trigger those. So we can talk about things that may trigger a depression or may turn that gene on, and what it might be is an extreme physical illness. It can be turned on by some catastrophic event that may happen in that person's life, a change in their lifestyle that is extremely abrupt or extremely derailing. So there are factors that can turn these things on. And another thing you pointed out, which is a good point, is that someone may lose a spouse and not go into a major depression, whereas somebody else may lose their car keys and suddenly it causes a cascade event that leads to a major depression. So it's not always the size of the event.
Yes. And I'm glad I'm glad you have brought light to that, because I think a lot of times when people are suffering in that way over some small thing that happens and it just feels like the world has ended, you feel kind of silly telling your friends or family, because the reaction is, well, you just lost your keys. What's the big deal? You know?
Right.
But if you've been like me, being detached from things, and that one little thing has triggered all of those things that have happened in the past that you just kind of didn't even, look at, and it just all comes, and it's not about losing keys.
Exactly.
But you think it is. And you haven't connected the dots that no, it's not about losing keys. It's about losing what? Did you lose your best friend in 6th grade? Did you lose, that like you said, a switch clicks on and you associate something with something else that you haven't really dealt with. Or, like you said, biochemical, because I know my dad suffered. So, it's an interesting thing, and that's the reason why I'm glad we're talking about it, because I know that the holidays are coming up, and we've all been taught that this is usually the biggest time for suicide. But you said something interesting the other day. You said it's usually it's leading up to the holidays, not necessarily during the holidays, correct?
Yes, I think that, I can recall to studying about depression when I was in training, and they would say there are two big hills of depression that will occur. One is in the fall and one is in the spring. And I think we kind of, as students, look back at that and we thought, the fall, again, it's the starting of things. It's usually when you go back to school and you have all of these thoughts about what you're going to do with the coming year, and that could be part of it. Part of it can be that the days are getting shorter, that there is a change in the, in the global seasonality that pulls us up short, and we have less sunlight. But then the other hump that is in the spring, a very early spring, maybe March or April, people say, that's when weather is getting better. But again, looking back at the mindset of depressed people, beginnings can also be a time of feeling overwhelmed. And also perhaps those times of the year haven't been the best for people who are depressed. And I think, the holidays and the idea of being around people or being isolated can be an issue. And in the spring, the thought that everybody should be thinking of new beginnings and starting over can also feel overwhelming. So there's that part of it. And as you said, knowing your family history. It doesn't mean if your mother or father or siblings have had a depression that you're inevitably going to have one. But it also means, though, that you need to know your own history so that you can pick up any signs or symptoms that you might have, and then have somebody to talk to about those things and make some sense out of them for you.
So what would you say if someone is struggling? What are the first a couple of things that a person can do to get them on the road to recovery and to, getting the help that they need, even though they might be a little bit more secret? A lot of times people don't want to tell other people what they're going through because they don't want to appear to be weak or. So what is it that you would suggest would be the first small step in dealing with, if you know that you're dealing with, if you can sense that you're dealing with depression, or that if some of the things that you've said kind of hits the person close to home, what would you say it would be?
I would say one of the first things is allowing yourself to say to yourself, I think I'm in a depression. The idea of admitting that there is something there, rather than thinking, what's wrong with me? Why don't I snap out of it? But to say to yourself, I think I'm in a depression, and it could be a major depression. And the reason that's important is because hopefully being able to say that takes it out of the realm of being something that you can talk yourself out of. Mm-hmm. I always tell people I work with, if you had high blood pressure, or you were diabetic, or you had, cataracts, or you had a respiratory tract infection, you wouldn't say, oh, how can I snap out of this? I should be able to get out of this high blood pressure on my own. No, what you would do is, and this is the second step, is getting to some professional who can evaluate what's going on with you. Sometimes, most of the time, the first professional that deals with a person's depression is their internist. That's usually the first step in the cycle. And if you don't have your own internist, to be able to go to either one of the freestanding clinics, or if it feels particularly severe, call your local hospital and ask for their psychiatry department and ask if you can have an appointment there. Now, that's if the depression is mild to moderate. If you're feeling like you can't go on and you're worried about your safety, then get to the emergency room, because 24/7 there is somebody there. There's a psychiatrist who can evaluate you. And it may take some time, but say to yourself, I'm worth this time, because the alternative is being alone with these negative, potentially life-ending feelings, and I need help. I can't carry it all by myself.
Right.
And then the other ancillary things to this is, as you're starting to feel better, some people think, oh, depression, they're going to put me on medicine, or I'm going to be admitted to the hospital. A lot of depressions don't require hospitalizations. Most of them don't. It can be very helpful to get that evaluation and have somebody officially tell you you're dealing with a depression, and this is what we're going to do for your treatment plan. Mm-hmm. So depression can be treated by psychotherapy and medication, and medication primarily, and then psychotherapy. But medication is not the only treatment, and the other things you can do to treat it are making sure you are around other people, that you don't isolate yourself, and that you have a structure for yourself. And that structure initially may seem very simplistic. Get up at the same time every day, eat at the same time every day, and make yourself call somebody that you trust and care about, and ask them to check in with you on a daily basis.
Oh, okay. Those are all good points. And for people who are listening, could you give everybody your background? Because it's not like you're just smart, Jeanette. She's just rattling off stuff she read. No, you're actually a trained therapist. So could you kind of tell
Yes.
what is your history and who you are and what you do for a living and all those things? And why we should listen to you?
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, I am a medical doctor. I am a psychiatrist who now specializes in psychotherapy. I love talking to people, and that is what I do in my, I won't say it's semi-retirement, but I am very blessed and fortunate enough to have a practice where I do deal with people with mood disorders, and I primarily, first and foremost, do psychotherapy and have other psychiatrists who enjoy doing the pharmacology side of it, who take care of medicating while I do the talk therapy. My background is that primarily I enjoy working with patients who have problems in terms of what we call mood disorders, and depression is certainly one of those that I work with a lot. So this knowledge has come through more than 30 years of dealing with people who have depressions or have bipolar disorders or may have a psychotic disorder, and working with them and learning from them about what goes on in their heads and in their lives.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing, because I just, when this had happened a couple of weeks ago, I said, I just feel so sad for his family, for him. And I just wanted to talk about it because I think a lot of people suffer in silence. And
Yes.
and if there's, anybody who's listening and they really think that that's what's happening with them, that you've given them great steps into seeking help.
Well, that is always my hope, to be able to provide people with information, because as you pointed out, the way we're brought up can be the thing that helps depression to grow and go to a terrible, disastrous end. The idea that we should snap out of it, the idea that you don't talk about it, it'll just get better in and of itself.
Right.
Well, the natural course of depression, it can run from 3 months to 9 months. But if you're someone who has a depression every 6 months, that means that you're constantly either getting over a depression or having another depression start.
Right.
That's in the course of an untreated depression.
Right.
And it really robs you of life. Depression can change your senses of how you see things. I've had depressed patients to tell me colors don't look as bright. I've had them say, I can't go in the shower because the water on my skin hurts. Food certainly doesn't taste the same, or they just find themselves eating out of habit and gaining lots of weight. And the mood swings that they can go through. Depression is, I can't say this loudly or long enough, depression is a physiologic experience. It is an illness. It's not a lifestyle. It's not, I'm just having a bad day and I'll get over it. Please, especially if you even think you may be going through a depression, get to a healthcare professional and don't try to get through this alone.
Thank you. Well, and if anyone has any questions, are they free to email you?
Yes.
At Aycock@atablefor1.com.
Yes, please do.
Or you can email inquiry@atablefor1.com. So I want to thank you, Miss Jeanette, for all your wisdom and your knowledge in this. And I'm just praying and hoping that, whoever feels like that might be them, that they will start the necessary steps into doing the thing that's going to propel them to feel better. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode, and be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And also check out our website at table4, spelled F-O-U-R, and the number 1.com. There you'll find interesting articles, our episode calendar, product recommendations, and information on becoming a patron. Thanks for listening.